Today we're going to be learning about how to measure to the nearest inch, half an inch, and quarter of an inch. So on page 697, you have a fish. If you take your ruler and you put your ruler right up the zero is going to be right here along flush with the nose of the fish, and you measure, you're going to see, if we're measuring to the closest inch, we're going to only focus on those big measurements, right? So the 0, the 1, and the 2. And we know that, so right here is 0. The fish would be, if it was only 1 inch, it would be up to here. But the fish is really up to here. So is the fish closest to 2? Or from here, is it closest to 1? And we can see that it is closest to 2. So if we're measuring to the nearest inch, we could say that the fish is almost 2 inches. Now, if they ask us to measure to the nearest half an inch, we know that this would be half an inch, that's 1, and then right here would be the other half between 1 and 2. So when they're asking us to measure to the closest half an inch, well, we're going to see that it is not closest to half an inch, it is not closest to 1 inch, but it is kind of closer, if you really think about it, to 1.5 than it is to 2. So you're going to say that it's closest to 1.5 inch when you're measuring to the nearest half inch. For the last one, they're asking us to measure to the nearest quarter of an inch. So a quarter of an inch, we know it's the little lines in between the half and the whole. So right there. So when we're measuring to the nearest quarter of an inch, well, we know it is not 1/4, it is not 1/2, it's not 3/4, it's not 1 inch, it's not 1 1/4 or 1 1/2, but it's really closest to right here. It's very close to 1 3/4. So we would say it is 1 3/4. Then they're going to give you a few ideas so that you guys get a general idea when you're measuring things. A paper clip is about 1 inch. The length of your math book is about 1 foot. And the height of a chair is about 1 yard. Later on, they're going to ask you to measure other things. So it's super important that you get your ruler and that you start measuring. So the butterfly, if we measure from one wing to the next wing, we would see that it is closest to 3 inches. So the butterfly would be, when we're measuring to the inch, so if this was the butterfly right there, and I had my ruler, I would see that from this end to this end, when I put the 0 right over here, my butterfly, it's closest to 3 inches because the 3 is kind of like right over here. So this would be 1, that's 0, 1, 2, and then 3 is like right over there, right? So it's closest to 3 inches. When they ask us to measure to the closest half an inch, well, right over here is like 2.5, right? So we know that it is definitely closer to 2.5 than it is to 3. So it's closest to 2.5. And when we're measuring to the closest quarter of an inch, we know that, so the half was right there, right? And the quarters are right there in between. Oops, I didn't put the half. There we go. So we know it is closest to 2 3/4 of an inch. Next, you're going to need to measure the stack of cubes that they're giving you. And again, you have a stack of cubes like this, right? There's 2 stacks like that. And you're going to measure from, they're supposed to be the same height. You're going to measure from here to here, right? And we know if this is your ruler, right here, if this was your ruler, you're going to put it right up against there. So the 0 would be right here. The 1 is about right there. And the 2 is about kind of off my little chart right there, right? So then If we're measuring closest to the inch, it is definitely closer to 2 inches than it is closer to 1. So we would say that it is closest to 2 inches. When we measure to the nearest half an inch, well, this would be the half an inch there, and the other more up here. Sorry, it's more like right there, the other half an inch. So we can see that it is closer to 1.5 right here than it is to the 2. So I would say that it's closest to 1.5 inches. And then when they're asking us to measure to the nearest quarter of an inch, well, this would be 1/4 right there and right there. It is actually closest to 1 3/4 of an inch. Do the same with the bike, and this is going to be an estimation. They're not actually asking you to go and measure the bike, but just think about it. If a chair is about 1 yard, you need to tell me, and your book is about 1 foot, what do you think? That bike is closest to 12 inches? Look at your ruler where 12 inches would be. Closest to 4 feet, I think it would be. And I think the right answer is actually the bike is closest to 4 feet.